My name is Hugh Dibley. I'm the chairman of the Toulouse branch of the Royal Aeronautical Society. And we welcome, of course, Tim Haig, who you will see very shortly, who's CEO of Valent. Is it Valent or Valent, Tim?
Valent, as in covalent bond. Yep.
Low carbon technologies. And of course, as you see, he will be talking to us, or is talking to us from Toronto about sustainable aviation fuels powering future aviation. Just a little bit, if you could go on to the next screen, to remind everybody very quickly about the Royal Aeronautical Society. It was formed in 1866, a few years ago, if we could keep going on. And this is really emphasizing that the Royal Aeronautical Society was set up in 1866 to share knowledge amongst the world, and this is what we're doing now. And it also, from the bottom, you will see that the Wright brothers actually used part of the papers in their endeavor to make the first powered flight. So if you could keep going on, thank you. And to remind you that we have 67 branches, because Tim was surprised that we have a Toulouse branch in 20 countries. And Toulouse branch was formed in 1991 by Gordon Call primarily. We go. And here we are, finally. Tim, we look forward to your presentation. And thank you very much for looking after us.
Thank you. Thank you very much for inviting us. This is your schedule of things to come. Richard, do you want to talk about that before you get going?
No, I think we'll go straight into your talk, if we may. Sure. I'm just going to go back to share the entire screen and share. That's it. Does it come up? Yes. Let me see if I can.
Okay, there it is. Yep.
Increase the size of that. It was F11, wasn't it? F11. Did that work?
Great.
Yes. Great.
Yes, sir. You're a pro. Well, first, thanks very much for inviting me. I love to have an opportunity to talk to people about what we're trying to achieve and what the progress we're making. Richard has been a longtime friend of mine. He worked very closely with the Canadian government and involved with a lot of things when we were creating more forward-leaning policy when it comes to aviation and other renewables. So Richard's been a good friend for, I'm going to say it's probably 15 years, isn't it, Richard? So I appreciate
it is Jim. Yeah.
I appreciate the opportunity to talk to you about what we're doing. I think what we're doing in Valent, I think what we're doing within Valent will be unique in the industry, and I'll explain why. But let's start with this picture. Why is this important? Well, the Valent thesis is we are going to electrify the light end of the barrel. And when I say the light end of the barrel, we call it gasoline, also known as naphtha. But I think over time, we'll electrify the things that can be propelled on the light end of the barrel. The heavy end of the barrel is going to be with us for some time. Marine gas oil, the long-haul trucking, perhaps, certainly in North America, there might be a little bit more au fait in Europe. Rail likely to be not electrified, at least in North America, for some time. But this picture is capturing what the heavy end of the barrel is. But most specifically, the most difficult thing to decarbonize is the heavy end of the barrel, specifically SAF. So we need to come up with a way to do it. And Valent has an approach that I'd like to talk to you about. And I promise I'm not going to join the all-Canadian boring team. I'm going to be 20 minutes, and then we get right into questions. But if people want to ask questions, please interrupt. I'm all ears. So go to the next slide, please, Richard. I was just joking about it. Put a young picture on here. This is a before and after picture of what a guy in renewable fuel space looks like. So that looks like myself, or my younger brother. So I've been in this space for about 25 years. And the reason I give you this bit of background is I want to explain the things we did wrong, because learning from your mistakes is super important. So first and foremost, in the year 2000, it was September 28th, 2000, actually, I set up a company called Biox. It was a biodiesel production company. We bought the technology from the University of Toronto. It was a different way of making fatty acid methyl esters. something you would not put in your wing, but it burns very well. It burns well in reciprocal engines. It burns cleanly. It's cheaper to make than SAF. There's a whole bunch of things that went right in that, but there are two significant downsides, and this was what Valent has come up. The biggest downside, first one, is it's not diesel or it's not jet. Like, we got to get cold flows where you can fly safely and without any hiccups. So the first one is it's not diesel or it's not SAF. Clearly, I know that's an obvious statement, but it is important. And the other part of this is, where are we going to get all the feedstock? Because our approach is to take lipids, and I'll talk about lipids in a minute, take lipids or fats, oils, and greases, and convert them into a fuel that is identical to what you refer to as Jet A. So that's my background on that. So over the page, and let's get into the meat and potatoes of this. So the market challenge. You know these. The next one, please. The key thing that we are looking at is that by the year 2030, we need a 1 point. I should have done this in liters or tons. I apologize. A lot of this is still in gallons because I had a North American presentation. But 1.3 billion gallons by 2030. And then to reach our target, this is a really big thing. And we need four things to happen. We need government policy to be in place. One thing that you're seeing, and you're still seeing it, is aircraft travel is increasing. You all have done amazing at getting aircraft to the efficiencies that they're going to get to. And we need to drive the corporate ESG commitments. And I'll explain what that means when it comes to dollars and cents and how we are selling our fuel into the market today. But scope 3, all of these things need to happen. And scope 3, which is the ESG corporate commitment that you're all familiar with, is estimated to be about 2.5 billion annually in additional income into a low carbon molecule. And one of the things that I say to people is, we're not selling a fuel. We are selling compliance. We happen to be selling a fuel to do it, but there's a whole bunch of things that happen and lead to being compliant. And I got to say, I really appreciate, saying about Richard, but Airbus has been on the forefront, as have others, on the forefront of ensuring that we get this market sorted out. And I'm very grateful for that. So let's go over the page, please, Richard. These are the classic what needs to happen. So these are obviously from Scattergy. You've seen all of these. Where's the EU demand? Where is it going? These are mandates, and these are super important to see. But the demand is vast. I'm going to use words like insatiable. But the market, if we could get a low carbon fuel into the market with a reasonable price and a reasonable cap, then the market is insatiable. And this molecule is likely to be with us for some time. Yes, we may electrify or put some hydrogen, but I do believe that if we do this properly, then we will be using SAF, and it can be derived from alcohol. I'll talk about that in a minute. But alcohol or lipids, and then some e-fuels are coming on. There's not going to be one silver bullet. There'll be several. But I do think the lion's share will be lipid-derived SAF, and I'll explain how we intend to play a big role in this. Over the slide, please, Richard. Again, this is a little bit more granularity, and what I'd like to ask you, Richard, is feel free to send this around. But these are the breakdown. The top left, it's probably hard to see, but it's the breakdown of where we are today with regards to where are the lipids coming into the markets to make this happen. And you can see very, very quickly that when we go to 2050 and we get to that 119 billion gallons, the traditional sources of lipids are not going to be there. That is why alcohol to jet has a play, because, and I'm not picking on alcohol to jet, but with regards to the process and the carbon efficiency of alcohol to jet, it's going to be very difficult to compete with the lipid approach I'll talk about that on another page. But alcohol to jet, because we are electrifying the light end of the barrel, there's going to be more alcohol available. Restructuring those alcohols into longer carbon chains to create SAF. It's scientifically known how to do it. Will we get to the carbon reduction we need and the prices? We'll have to see. But that is why alcohol to jet has a play, and will have a play. And I'm going to use a Canadian expression. You're in the woods, and a bear comes out of the woods. You don't have to outrun the bear. You just have to outrun the other guy that's with you, as long as you can outrun them. In this case, I really want alcohol to jet to be successful, because we will be able to kill it. We'll be able to make some very, very good margins, because we're going to have a significantly better carbon footprint, which I'll explain on some slides going forward. So let's go over the next slide, please. So why Valent? So next slide. Here's the thing. This is the thesis that I present to you guys today, unique to everything else. When I was doing biodiesel, the two key things that I was frustrated with is, one, it wasn't diesel or SAF, and the other thing is, where are we going to come up with all the feedstock to do it? So we've created two companies. One of them is Marvel. I'll explain that in the second part of this, the next few slides. And then Forge. Forge is a technology that I purchased from the University of Alberta in Edmonton, Alberta. And it's a way of making renewable diesel and SAF that's not the same as Nestle and all the rest of it. And I'll talk about that. And at the same time, we're going to create vast amounts of lipids so that this market can be serviced. The Marvel will make lipids. We could sell them to the Nestes of this world, to the Honeywells, to whoever is making SAF and others, or we could sell them to ourselves. Obviously, but I want to make sure that there's enough lipids in the market that we can create the supply to the demand that is clearly in the market that you're doing. I'll talk about the higher SAF yields and everything on another couple slides. So let's go into the next couple slides, Richard. Okay, next one. So this is a complicated slide, so you're going to want to read this later, but I've got 3 columns here. And this is, the first column there is biodiesel. That's where I came from. We sold hundreds of millions of gallons of biodiesel. We still are. We're still selling a lot of biodiesel. It's not as profitable as renewable diesel now, but a fatty acid methyl ester adds to compliance under diesel. It can only be blended to certain amounts, especially in cold climates like Canada. So that is, but it is a very good molecule for compliance. That second column is, I call it conventional or HEFA or HVO renewable diesel, and say SAF in there too. That is where you take a lipid and you bombard it with hydrogen in the presence of catalyst, and you create renewable diesel and you create a cut of SAF. That is out there. You're probably buying from people like World Energy. Talk about that in a minute. There's 2 things that's important. Here's a thesis that I'd like to focus on, or thought that I'd like to focus on. What is petroleum? Petroleum is lipids captured in the Earth's crust for 50 million years. There's 2 things I'm really certain about. There's no hydrogen down there, and there's no catalyst. So there has to be a way of making these molecules without hydrogen catalyst. And when I was taking Biox public, which I did in 2010, we took this public, people would ask me, what would make your company better? And I could find a renewable diesel technology that didn't use hydrogen and catalyst. And I found that. I found that at the University of Alberta in the year 2015. And we started scaling it up. So this technology doesn't use hydrogen and catalyst. Why is that important? First and foremost, hydrogen is too valuable to burn. It's too expensive to make, and it's too carbon intensive to make. So if you could make these molecules without using hydrogen, you would. Then the second part of this is catalyst. So if you can make this molecule without using a very expensive catalyst, you would, because there's a lot of feedstocks out there, and this is a very technical term, that are shitty, that are very dirty, and are very in the market. So we're able to, without pretreatment, we're able to make renewable diesel and SAF without hydrogen catalyst. That is significantly better because we have plus 95% reduction to renewable diesel and SAF than petroleum, and we are better than about, I'm going to say, at least 10 to 20 carbon points better than anybody out there in the renewable diesel or SAF play, and we'll have the highest yield from the incoming lipids. So those two things are super important, and that allows us. Here's another thing that I think is important to your aeronautical society, and probably specifically Airbus. When you eliminate the need for hydrogen, you also can build these plants smaller. You can build them, 40, 50 million gallon facilities. You can put them at airports. You can create a distributed renewable diesel play as opposed to having these massive refineries, which is what oil and gas likes to do in, I don't know, the Gulf Coast or in Rotterdam or whatever, sucking all the fats and oils into there and then spitting out and distributing. That significantly reduces the cost and the carbon because distribution is one of the things we do. So there'll be more questions on that, I'm sure, later on. But let's go on to the next couple slides. Now let's talk about the feedstock. So that was Fuel Co. Now let's talk about Lipid Co. Okay, I said earlier, what is petroleum? Petroleum or lipids captured in the Earth's crust 50 million years ago. 50 million years ago, the world was covered in pond scum, most of it generating a lipid or a biomass base, but mainly lipid, and they converted it into the Earth's pressure temperature over the period of time, converted into crude oil, which we take out, that we refine into these different processes. Well, I want to skip 50 million years. So the same time I was taking Biox public, I bumped into a high net worth Canadian out of the east coast of Canada, and he was fermenting lipids. So this is not ponds. There's two types of algae in this world. There's green algae that uses photosynthesis and that's great for making starches and proteins, which will be great for food, but it's not very good at making lipids. They make a very, very low amount of triglycerides or lipids. If you want to make lipids from things like woody biomass and others, you need to use this kind of fermentation. So we have an organism that can convert starches, woody biomass, C5s and C6s into lipids, and the volumes that we could create are astounding. Let me put this into context. If in Canada and the States, there are about, let's say, 75 very, very large ethanol plants, and they take 1 unit of feedstock that they ferment. They take 3.6 units of feedstock to make 1 unit of alcohol. In the same context, we make 4.1 units of that same feedstock to make 1 unit of lipid. What is important about that is lipid is 3 to 5 times more energy dense and is closer to petroleum than an alcohol is. So it is far more energy reductive or carbon reductive to ferment it into a lipid over an alcohol. So we're in discussion with many of these alcohol plays and to retrofit to produce lipids. And our first lipid production facility will be in the States. I can't tell you it is because it's under confidentiality, but we will be producing lipids. We're already producing, the company that we've licensed the technology from already makes lipids into omega-3s. We just make a lower value lipid. And we're going to be able to produce vast amounts. And I use a Canadian context, and I hope it's not lost on you, but out of one large ethanol plant in the States, we can produce as much lipids as come out of the largest canola and rapeseed a province, which is Saskatchewan, out of one plant. So we'd be able to do vast amounts of lipids and be able to go a long way to satisfy the needs within the SAF play. So let's go over this. Go over the slides. So what's next for Valent? This is impossible to see, but this has been asked by a couple people that are looking to invest. What people want to see is, when do we think we can get to something like 500 million liters of SAF online? And if everything goes well with the production that we have underway and sites that we're trying to bring online, including two that we're talking to, actually, one of them's in Germany. We'll be at 500 million liters by 2030, 2031, 32. So it's not going to solve all your issues, because I know the demand from your industry is very large, but we need to reduce the carbon in this very important industry, aviation, and we feel we're going to be a key part to do that. And that's our plan. And again, when you get the slide, have a read. Please send me a note. Tell me if I'm out of my mind, whatever. But it wouldn't be the first time that I've heard that, Richard, is it? So that's where that is. So that's my presentation. I said it was going to be 25 minutes. I think we started a little late. I think it's 25 minutes. So the next slide, I just think, is a picture of an engine, and that's our presentation. I hope it wasn't boring. I hope that, and I'm happy to take as technical questions as you'd like to throw at me.
So do we have any questions?
I think we're going to have quite a few questions. How should we handle them?
Well, indeed.
Shoot.
So, yep. So if I go back to, where are we? This is where stop sharing. I'm going to stop sharing. Okay, so now we're back to that. Yeah, well, no questions for the moment, but I have a question. So, Tim, a long time ago, we did some work with a company that used H2 and catalysts, and I guess it was the HEFA process to try and convert some algal lipids into fuel. And we came across a problem that the algal oil hadn't been produced in the right way, so therefore, if it went into the conversion process, it would have killed the catalyst and done a lot of expensive damage to the oil transformation process.
The same thing could be said, Richard, with Toulouse and all the rest of it. They just need to pre-treat it like they do. We don't need to pre-treat it through our technology, because there's no catalyst to ruin. So we don't need a pre-treatment step. We just throw it in and we make our fuel and we distill it in. So we make a SAF cut and a naphtha cut and a gas cut. And we just distill it into our different levels. But you're absolutely right. But that can be said about any feedstock. Canola needs to be pre-treated. If it has any metals in it from a catalytic point of view, you will poison, especially a phosphate. So if something comes from a green plant like canola, or calcium, if it comes from animal byproducts, or sulfur, if it's used to make food, believe it or not, it generates a lot of sulfur in that. Any one of those would put a hard time on catalyst. So you're right. So I told them, the guys, just put it through your normal pre-treatment and you'll be fine. So they does that help, Richard?
Yeah, no, that's very interesting. But what about the cost base for the conversion? So your lipid to fuel versus HEFA.
Well, the algal oil that we produce. Let me go into a little bit of detail. Within Marvel, we produce an algal oil that has a cut. About 10% of the algal oil is omega-3s. Okay. So if you think about ethanol, guys, they have this great expression. They have we drink the best and drive the rest. So they distill off and they have their best cut of alcohol goes into vodka bottles, and then the rest of it goes into a tank. Well, kind of similar what we're going to do. We have about 5 to 10% of our throughput is a super long carbon chains. They're about C24s, but these are super valuable, and they go into infant formula, and we'll carve those off, and we'll have a revenue base going into that, or into fish feed or animal feed. But those are valuable from human consumption, either via feeding it to a fish or taking it for eye and heart health. So those long carbon chains are quite fragile. So when we put them through without separating it, we make great fuel. We just take for gases than we would if we extract those chains, because the chain lengths go from C8s all the way to C25s. We extract anything above C20s and goes into omega-3s. So from C8s to C20s, if we go into our process, we make predominantly SAF. So if we don't separate those chains, we'll end up making more gases, which is fine, because those gases are used to make hydrogen and other things. So they're still valuable, but they're way more valuable to go into a caplet or go into something else. So so there you go. I see a couple technologies, a couple questions come up. Should I handle those, Richard? Are you going to read those? There's a couple that just
yeah. Well, I mean, you can read them if you can see them, Tim. Please, take them.
John, let me just get up here. Oh, here we are. John Turton asks us, what impact will this technology have on the food transhuman? No, that's a great question. Right out of the gate, John, we're going to be producing our first set of lipids, and we will be using stuff that's more like corn, and it's coming out of things replacing ethanol. So that it won't have any impact, because all we're going to do is displace ethanol for that. But the next technologies that we're just finishing off right now uses woody biomass and agriculture residues, so it should have zero. There is no what they call it, land use changes as far as at all. Plus, in North America, I know it's different in Europe, but North America, you can create a C3 RIN. So that is a very important aspect of things. Does that answer your question, John? I can't hear you if you're answering, but or give a thumbs up or down, whatever. I can go into more.
That's great. Thank you very much.
Okay, thanks, John. And then there was one here about PETA, and yes, Jean-Michel, I totally agree. I mean, right now, animal fats, they are a byproduct, not a waste product, because they still have value from the rendering industry, and a lot of them are heavily contaminated with metals, and they won't find a home in feed, so we can turn those into fuel. So, you know, I expect very quickly, this is the important thing about making your own feedstock. I expect very quickly that we'll be producing our own lipids that don't have any of this taint on it, because there is some taint for sure. So does that answer it, Jean-Michel? Yeah, okay. I love the thumbs that bubble up. To add to that, so Jonathan asked a question. Is it quite a drop-in process? Yes and no. Okay, so we are now cleared to 10% drop-in. Right now, because we tap it with hydrogen at the end, we do not have enough aromatics to have a thorough drop-in. We have a process that's working on creating more aromatics so that we can be exactly the same. Right now, I think people refer to it as a very dry fuel. It has everything you want to see in it but aromatics. So right now we are fungible up to 10%. So Jonathan, does that answer your question there? Okay. And Karthik, philosophy of SAF, using feedstock non-compete. Yeah, well, I try to answer that the same as I answered above. we need to. We are painfully aware. I'll be honest. When I started Biox, which is the biodiesel thing, it was in the height of mad cow disease. So our profitability was the fact that fats were not worth anything. So that was a interesting opposite to this, which is now we need to get away from that. We need to, but there will always be some waste fats and oils, lipids that are available that it's better that they go into fuel. The only other thing that will happen, it will go into anaerobic digestion, which is valuable and making gases, but turning them into long chain hydrocarbons from a carbon reduction point of view is way more valuable than a short chain gas. There's a lot of ways to make short chains, and using a lipid to make a short chain gas is wasteful from a carbon reduction point of view. Karthik, does that answer your question? I did. Question from okay, thanks.
Question from the room from Peter Potocci.
Peter,
thank you very much. You've been talking about using wood and agricultural waste as a feedstock. Have you had a pilot plant running yet using these feedstocks?
Yes.
Please.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah, we have a lot more work to do. Let me be really clear. When you blow up wood into, I don't like using the word sugars because sugars ends up getting an emotive response. So I use carbon sources. The carbon sources that come out of wood are threefold: lignin and woody and agricultural waste. Lignin, which is the structure. Okay, that's what holds the plant together. And then you have C6 carbon sources, dextrose, and C5s. In woody biomass, in the sugars carbon source, if you took the lignin out, it's about 70% C6s and 30% C5. It actually it depends on the kind of wood you have, but that's kind of roughly speaking. Our organism, it prefers to eat C6s. It's kind of like you throw me in a room with a bunch of steak and spinach. I'll eat the steak first, but I'll get onto the spinach. And that's exactly what happens. So it will consume the C6s first, and then it consumes the C5s. It's a little slower in its consumption of 5s, but that's not a yield issue. It eats it. So, Peter, I don't know if that answers, but I want to be quite specific on how to answer that question.
No, I was thinking of the scale that you've been producing fuel on from these feedstocks.
Okay, well, we haven't been producing fuel. We produce the lipids to produce the fuel, to be really pragmatic. We have produced it at commercial scale plants, at the 200,000 liter plant, which is what we need to show to prove that we can do it. Okay?
Thank you very much.
And then we've taken those lipids and we pulled out the omega-3s and we made it into fuel. So we've done not site because those facilities, and we might not have Lipid Co. right beside Fuel Co. anyway. So they may be, but they may not be. So, but the chain of custody has been proven.
So you have produced fuel at the end?
Of course, yes. And that fuel has been tested by the Canadian government under what's called Sky's the Limit. So you might want to look that up. And we showed that we can make SAF to Jet A1 standards.
Right.
Okay.
Couple more questions online. Tim?
There's more. Okay, I can't see them.
Can you see them? There's one.
Okay. Oh, I see now. Yep.
Yep. Bautista.
Okay, Bautista. Would lipid-derived SAF produce thrust levels? It really interesting. Ion propellant. Are you talking about trails, contrails? Is that the question? Somebody help me out.
Ion propellants. Sounds. So what's it? What's
that? I'm not sure, Batista. Can I get back to you on that? I'm afraid I don't know, but let me answer it in a different way. If you interrogate or if you test a blind test of our fuel against Jet A1 that doesn't have aromatics in, you cannot tell the difference. They're entirely the same, except if you carbon dated carbon-14. Ours would be a year old, and the other would be 50 million years old. So I think the answer is there's no difference, but I'm going to have to go to my fuels guy and ask that. I will get back to you, though, okay? I will get back to you.
Yeah, sounded like a space-related question, Bautista. I don't know if that's what you were referring to.
Aircraft industries. So let me go back to Patrick said, what's the cost compared to Jet A1? That's the big question. What we have entered into with DHL and I've been selling fuel for the last 25 years. That's why I'm gray right now, because it's been really hard. And recently we've entered into contracts with DHL, as an example, and with Microsoft, of all people, to have offtakes, and there's a couple other ones that we hope to be in, and it's on a margin-based Karthik. So we will open book cost what our things in, plus there's a set margin, and the set margin is approximately what the offsets would be in the industry, like a RIN, LCFS in California, Scope 1, Scope 2. But we are, as fuel producers now, we are no longer taking market risk. We're handing that off and to the people that are burning the fuels, where the risk should reside. So that's what's happening right now. I don't want to go through but it's approximately $2.50 US a gallon more than Jet A1 today. That's where we are. Okay. Did that answer your question, Karthik? Yeah, I love that.
Yeah, I mean, Tim, I think the second part of Karthik's question related to what will happen in the future. So, I mean, can you comment on that?
Yeah,
very large scale production.
Yeah, well, this is a bold statement, but Richard, you know me as the optimist, and I'm a bold guy, and so far I've been right on most of my predictions. I do believe that when we get woody biomass in the kind of production we need to be in, it will unlock vast amounts. And like the Canadian government is so excited. Like, I don't know if you guys are aware, but pulp and paper in Canada was a big industry. That's because we don't read anything on paper anymore. We read it on our screens. That industry has been crushed. Turning that into a feedstock production, those trees are still growing, and turning that into an industry and having these vast, I believe that we will be able to, bold prediction, we will be less than fuel by 2040. That's what my prediction is. Interestingly enough, ethanol right now is less than gasoline in the States. So they managed to do it. It's not on a BTU basis, I admit that, but on a volume basis, it's 15% less. So that becomes very interesting. And I don't know, but it's about being able to produce lipids at the kind of vastness that we need to be able to do it from something that is not going to hurt the food market, but it's not something that's in the fuel market either. And we can do long-term fixed price on woody biomass as they were doing in pulp and paper. I don't know, Karthik, Richard, does that sound like I may have answered that? And close enough?
Thanks for that. That's a handy footnote. Yep. Another one from John Turton.
Okay, sorry, I've got to scroll down. The aircraft industry seems to be emphasizing hydrogen as a solution presently. Your assessment? Well, here's the thing. I'm not. Hydrogen, are you talking about putting hydrogen into wings? If that's what you're talking about, John, I think we're a long time from putting, if we can get you as an industry, something that that we could satisfy these needs and have the same molecule, and you don't have to change your infrastructure and everything. That is what I think is I mean, let's face it, the oil and gas industry is the biggest industry the world has ever seen. If we can comply within that industry without creating a whole lot of changes, and that's as I said, the downside of biodiesel is it's not diesel. So if we could do that, we will be the solution that's needed. I believe that we need to have options, because I do also think mankind is so used to having a silver bullet. And if you want the silver bullet, it's petroleum, but it comes with a lot of problems. It's called carbon. So we need to replicate that industry the best we can, and without disrupting the cost on a relative cost basis. But here's another bold statement. Putting 10% into a wing to start off with, I was doing a calculation from Toronto to London on a flight. One business class person would have to pay 100 Canadian dollars more for their seat in business class for that to be equal. It's not a big number at $2.75 above cost. It's not a big number. So I think we'd be able to do that. I think it's going to be a lot more cost effective to do it with a hydrocarbon that is renewable than it is with jet. But that's just my view. The energy density of hydrogen is super tough. And you guys know that more than anybody. Again, I don't know if I answered that question properly, John. Let me know. Okay.
Sounding pretty good, Tim. And so what are your major challenges, Tim?
Well, we got to close this financing. We got to close this financing now. We're in the end stages of closing a financing. We're probably 60 to 90 days away from closing, and then it's go time. So we've got some great partners. Shell and Chevron are in the mix right now. We've got a couple of airlines that are saying that they would like to participate in this round and have some offtakes. We would love. Here's another thing that I'm going to just make fun of myself on this. When we were putting this together, Richard, I was always down the line of renewable diesel. That's the market that's really big. It turns out that our technology is super well suited to make SAF. It wasn't like we intended that. It's like playing golf and hitting off a tree and going into a hole. It's pretty lucky. So we are pivoting quite substantially towards the SAF, because that is where, I think, let's face it, it's a tougher market to decarbonize. There's a whole bunch of ways you can move a ship around. There's not a whole lot of ways you can move a plane around. So we're focusing more on the SAF molecule, but we still have shareholders that are very interested in a renewable diesel molecule and also a renewable naphtha molecule. In North America, they're at the blend wall of ethanol into gasoline. You can't put any more. So if we have renewable naphtha that's around the same price, we can put that into gasoline and make a premium. So there's a bunch of things that's going on. We got to finish building this plant. We got to get our first lipid plant up. We need to get our contracts going and proving that we can do a fixed margin contract. And if we can, then being able to raise the next level of finance that go forward will be rather simple. It's never easy. And I got to tell you, the last 2 years have been super tough in the world of renewables. But that's where we are, Richard. I don't know if I answered it or it just sounded like a politician. So
no, thanks. Yeah. So effectively, the next challenge is cash.
Yep, we're closing around. Yep.
Very good.
Good question. What is the output from burning fuel the same as other SAF?
Yeah. So, Tim, did you hear that question?
Yes. It's slightly better because we have less particulates. We have way less. We don't have particulates, or
Don't have noxes. Yeah.
So we don't. This is how I understand it. And your guys, the contrails from burning our stuff is better, and that's what I understand. And I know that that's something that is top of mind to deal with. But it burns cleaner. It's got a slightly higher cetane number. So, and I know that's not as important in a turbine engine, but it does burn more completely, and it helps burn other things that will be coming out, especially on startup. But I know startup is not as big of an issue, but that's what I understand.
Okay.
Great. So no more questions? No more questions from the room?
Just
Question.
just a quick question on Mike from Airbus. Just in terms of the footprints of the operation, you mentioned 500 million litres by 2030, 2031, and then potentially scaling up much more from there. But in terms of raw stock, land usage, what is the footprint?
Great question. So we're building sorry to flip from gallons to liters. I can't do that as quickly in my head, but we're building a 50 million gallon process outside of Sarnia, which is across the water from Detroit. If you're looking on the map, people don't know where Sarnia is. It's near Toronto where I am, and that is on a 12-acre site. It's quite small. That is Fuel Co. Lipid Co. We can produce 85% the volume of an ethanol plant on the same footprint of lipids. I know that's an abstract number. I say 85% because, as I said earlier, they take 3.6 units of material and ferment it into a gallon. We use 4.1. You do that, 4.1 divided by 3.6, it's 85%. So we've got a very, very good, and our process, my background being biodiesel, we expect to retrofit biodiesel facilities to make renewable and SAF facilities because they're all that kind of size, and we'll retrofit ethanol facilities to make Lipid Co. And some of these will coincide in certain places. I believe in places like Norway and Sweden and places like that have vast amount of woody biomass, like Canada, will co-locate it. And it doesn't mean we can't do bigger plants, but the first plant we're building, it has units of 10 million gallon units, and each one of those units is about 2.5 acres a unit. And then we just scale those up from there. Just put them side by side. Does that answer the question?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Any more questions? Oh, there is actually. Oh no, somebody's just leaving. Yep, said great discussion. Many thanks, Tim.
Thanks, Matt, from Berlin. There we go.
Yeah, very good. So Hugh, I think it's back to you.
Well, can you go back to the?
I'll go back to the. I was hoping you wouldn't.
Because we got three computers at one stage.
Yes. Share. How do I share? Let's go back. That's it.
Back one. There we are.
That's it.
Can you see that up there? Can you expand that? Just to say that, well, first of all, thanks very much indeed for.
Yep. Thanks, Tim,
for educating us. In an area which, from my start, I have very little knowledge. My son read biochemistry at Oxford. Perhaps he might have helped me, but I need some education in the subject. Well, thanks very much indeed.
Thank you very much. Yeah.
But just to go to the future for our branch, you can see we have our lectures sketched out, if I can put it that way, till June next year, if you include the annual dinner at the end of June. In a month's time, we hope that Gary Brown will be here. We just have to confirm that. Slightly later on, again, I don't want to go through this individually because we do have it on the website eventually. And just really to saying that we have our plan for the whole season. And I hope you can come along and be part of us. Our plan again is to have hybrid. And thanks again to Richard for having your confuser working extremely well.
Yeah, quite how and why that worked this time, I don't know, but we were lucky. Yeah.
Alexandra, who is our resident current Airbus IT expert, because Richard is retired, 3 years ago now?
Yeah, that's right, Hugh, yeah.
And Peter Patocki a few years ago, and then Bernard Matos a few years before that, as I was. But as I say, Alexandra has been central in organising the room. Our domestic stuff has been the symposium room, which we've always used before. As ever, after COVID, the rules changed and we have to pay for the technician. And actually getting somebody in Airbus and a budget is just too difficult. So if we're doing hybrid, which is the plan, then we really don't often need such a large room. So the idea is perhaps to move to another place in B22, but that we'll explain that in due course. Anyhow, just to say, if you can go on really, just to confirm that we encourage people to become branch members. Thank you to those of us who would like to support the local branch, which really is, to agree, is an act of faith, but we're coming up with certain events done by Gisela Bono, which will require a branch local membership to go to these various events. And to remind students, if they're around, that they have free membership to the Royal Aeronautical Society in London, which, would you believe, has some 24,000 members. And all they've got to do is just go to the link we have there, and they will get straight access as student members, as long as, of course, they're at the university, and that gives them access to a lot of stuff within the society of information and magazines and the library. So we encourage people to do that. And to finally, just to confirm that we have our Toulouse branch, which is managed by Gisela Bono, and we have links to the Aero Society, and our lectures will be on the Aero Society when they come up. And we have links with the TOISA-F and the Académie de l'Espace. So thank you very much indeed for coming with us. I hope it's worked out online. Do we have an idea of how many people we have online, or is that too difficult?
No, I think we had about 42 at one point. Yeah,
42?
42.
Well, that's getting up there. Anyhow, thank you for joining us, and we hope you find it as interesting as I did, and I'm sure we did there. And thanks again to you, Tim.
Thank you very much for having me. I'd love to have the opportunity. Thank you.
We have to thank Richard here for being such friends with you and persuading you to come.
Getting me to stop talking is the trick. That's the thing. So there you go. All right. Thanks, Richard. Be well, my friend.
Are you a dinner? Yeah.
Yeah. Same. All right, buddy. Be well.